From the time we exchanged greetings, my sister-in-law didn't seem to like me. She would stare at me from head to toe with a piercing gaze and laugh at me under her breath. At the time, I could only guess that she was making fun of the way I looked. I must have seemed like someone she could easily make fun of or put down to make herself feel better. That's why, when she asked for my help, I refused. I couldn't think of a single reason for me to help her. A story by Maria Bailey. My name is Maria. I got married to my husband 3 years ago, and now we live with my in-laws. My father-in-law passed away when my husband was a student, so today it's me, my husband, and my sister-in-law and mother-in-law living together. Initially, there was no plan to live together. It was just my husband and me. However, a year after getting married, my mother-in-law had an accident and hurt her leg, so we decided to move in with her so that we could help care for her. My sister-in-law, Dorothy, was already living at home, but finally my mother-in-law tearfully told my husband that she was unreliable. As it turned out, Dorothy wasn't contributing to the household expenses at all. She was single and spent her money going out to bars and clubs. It would be nice if she could have at least supported her mother, but instead she caused trouble by maxing out credit cards, asking her mom for money, or leaving her to do all the housework, even though she had a bad leg from her accident. Honestly, I think my mother-in-law is far too lenient on her daughter. Dorothy is in her late 20s, but I guess parents always feel compelled to take care of their children, no matter how old they are. That's why, even though my mother-in-law admits her daughter is unreliable, she feels she can't kick her out and lets her stay at home. Of course, I didn't want to live with them. My mother-in-law is a kind and gentle person, but that's a separate issue, and it takes some resolve to suddenly learn how to live together, no matter how nice the person is. And above all, I hated the idea of living with my sister-in-law. I wouldn't have lived with Dorothy even if I were paid to. I felt she looked down on me since the beginning of our marriage. To put it simply, Dorothy is like the controlling leader who would rotate out one friend at a time from the group during school days. I might sound childish for saying this, but I've always thought she was a malicious person who never grew out of that habit of using people for her own advantage. I felt that she didn't like me from the moment my husband introduced me to her. She asked my name, and when I answered, she stifled a laugh. I'm 32 years old. Turns out that laugh was because I was younger than she had thought. I'm sorry, I thought you were about 40. You look so mature. To put it bluntly, she probably wanted to say that I looked older. Since then, every time she saw me, she would ask about the brands of my clothes, comment on my appearance, and look down on me with a mocking laugh. A grown-up over 30 wearing fast fashion. Oh my, but Maria seems out of touch, doesn't she? Were you homeschooled or something? You don't seem like you'd get along with the fashionistas like my friends are. Of course, I'm not the type to stand out, and I'm not particularly interested in fashion. Dorothy may be able to believe that I don't dress well, but that doesn't mean she has any right to ridicule me. Moreover, I do have friends. Not many, but they're there. I feel sorry for the people who say they like me when I'm being ridiculed so much. I knew we didn't get along immediately, but it has only seemed to get worse. If she's going to have this attitude, I decided that I just need to avoid her as much as possible. With that in mind, I decided to ignore her without arguing or pointing out her faults in return. All of a sudden, my mother-in-law needed help, and the discussion of living together came up. I told my husband that I absolutely didn't want to live with Dorothy, but then my mother-in-law called and asked if I would reconsider. My mother-in-law was 62 at the time, and apparently had plans to move into a senior living facility with support services when she turned 65 in 3 more years. She asked if we could please share a home until then. Faced with such a desperate plea, I couldn't find the words to refuse. Limited-term cohabitation. It was a big ask, but it was only for a fixed amount of time. That was my motivation for deciding to live together. So that's the backstory, and now my husband and I are living with his mother and sister. It's already been 2 years, so there's only about 1 year left. My mother-in-law is keeping her promise and is actively looking for supportive housing facility so the cohabitation won't drag on indefinitely. I feel a little guilty, as if I'm driving her out, but my mother-in-law, sensing my feelings, reassures me that this was her intention from the beginning. She probably wanted to take her time sorting out the house during these 3 years. In retrospect, I feel a little guilty for not agreeing to live together from the start. Of course, the idea of living with my sister-in-law was truly unpleasant, so I needed time to brace myself, and living with her has been difficult. Even now, I struggle with the day-to-day interactions of sharing a home with her. When we first started living together, she was particularly harsh on me, complaining about the food I cooked and constantly criticizing my cleaning. My mother-in-law and husband would scold her for complaining, but she seemed completely unfazed. It feels like she doesn't think of me as her brother's wife. but more like a slave or a maid. For about a week I was blamed for the way I washed her clothes. "You shrank my clothes because of the detergent you chose. They're all misshapen and unwearable now. You've been married for 3 years and you still can't handle housework. You are essentially useless." I wanted to tell her that it wasn't my fault the clothes shrank. It was actually because my sister-in-law had gained weight. However, I didn't want to comment on someone's appearance. I know how hurtful those comments can be. I said I'd be more careful next time and tried to end the conversation. But my sister-in-law is not the type to forgive and forget any mistake made against her. When my mother-in-law's acquaintance visited our home, Dorothy laughed as she talked about how terrible I was at housework. Of course my mother-in-law defended me, but Dorothy insisted there was no need and kept talking as if I were a completely useless home appliance, not a human being or her relative. Sometimes I'd argue back, but mostly I'd just nod and let her talk wash over me. I didn't want to stoop to her level, and I knew that arguing with her would be a waste of breath. I told my mother-in-law and husband that after we stopped living together this year, I don't want to have anything to do with Dorothy, and both of them agreed. It might be a bit spiteful, but I think Dorothy will struggle when my mother-in-law moves into a senior living facility. She's been living at home and spending her salary however she wants. I don't think someone like that can suddenly live on her own responsibly. We won't help her once we stop living together. That's my little revenge. But sometimes it seems like even God is on my sister-in-law's side. She told me that her boyfriend had proposed to her. "My boyfriend's tall, and he's handsome. He's so kind. He has a great job at a huge company, so I'm basically marrying into money. I'm so glad I put effort into my looks and fashion. I wouldn't want a miserable life like someone I know, living with in-laws after marriage." She chuckled while looking at me, making it obvious she was talking about me. Dorothy stood before me, smirking, and said, "I bet you thought I wouldn't be able to live on my own without my mom. Too bad for you, old lady." I couldn't help but blush a little because she hit the nail on the head with what I was thinking about her. At the same time, I felt a strong wave of frustration. "Congratulations on your engagement. But married life is tough, you know." She might complain about me not being able to do housework, but the one who really can't do anything is Dorothy. It was the best comeback I could muster, but she just looked triumphant. "Are you trying to act tough because I won't be around? My fiancé is rich and will hire a professional housekeeper, not someone useless like you." I was utterly defeated. I swore I would never see Dorothy again once we stopped living together. I swallowed my pride and decided to avoid her as much as possible at home for the remaining time we had as housemates. A month after Dorothy's announcement, her fiancé came to visit. I thought anyone who would choose her must not be a good person. I even had such a terrible thought. I had been warned by Dorothy not to introduce myself to her fiancé. "I don't consider you family. Once you've served tea, just go away. I'm not inviting you to the wedding anyway." I felt relieved when I heard those words. I just wanted to cut ties with her as soon as possible. When her fiancé arrived, I reluctantly served tea as instructed. Knowing this might be the first and last time we'd meet, I stole a quick glance at Dorothy's fiancé's face. As I did so, our eyes met. And it was inevitable. "You are—" As her fiancé began to speak, Dorothy interrupted, saying it wasn't a big deal. "She's our housekeeper, so you don't have to worry, Steve. I told you before, right, that I have a useless sister-in-law who can't do anything. It's a loss just to get involved with her, so you can ignore her." Upon hearing those words, I bowed my head slightly to her fiancé and left the room, feeling embarrassed. Then Dorothy's fiancé called me by my name. "Maria, you were a senior consultant at the firm, right? I can't believe you're married to Dorothy's brother." Steve stared at me in disbelief. In fact, he was familiar to me. He was my junior at work until I quit after getting married. I had heard that he changed jobs after that, but neither of us had ever imagined we would meet again like this. "Dorothy, I've heard a lot about your sister-in-law before, but I never knew it was Maria. I thought she must be a terrible person because you've only said bad things about her. But we used to work together. I know who she is." Dorothy didn't seem to understand why Steve was angry. I wondered just how badly my character had been misrepresented, and I felt a little anxious. "You two knew each other?" At Dorothy's bitter smile and question, Steve desperately explained how we had worked closely together. I had helped him at work before and even lent him money when his mother was sick and needed money for surgery. It felt only natural for me to help him as his senior at work, and I had lent him money because he was in real trouble. At that time, my grandfather had just passed away and left me some inheritance, so I was easily in a position to be able to help him. I felt there was no need for Steve to feel so indebted to me, but when I took a moment to think about it and put myself in his shoes, I realized that the money must have been a real lifesaver. Maria was a true friend to me, and yet you treat her like a housekeeper? I knew you could be harsh with your words, but I can't stand someone who treats people like this. I clearly need to rethink this. Our engagement is off. With a cold, incredulous gaze, Steve told Dorothy he was breaking off their engagement and tried to leave his seat. Desperate to stop him, Dorothy grabbed his jacket as he got up from the sofa. "No, it's not like that. This is just how Maria and I communicate. We joke around a lot. Right, Maria?" Dorothy looked to me for help in a panic, but I could only shake my head. "Sorry, I can't lie." Upon hearing this, Dorothy broke down crying on the spot. "Why are you ruining my marriage? It's your fault the engagement is off," she yelled and raised her hand to strike me, but my husband rushed in at that moment to intervene and held her back from hitting me. Still lashing out at me, Dorothy was slapped by my mother-in-law. "It's not Maria's fault. It's yours. You've been harassing her and causing trouble all this time. I won't tolerate it anymore. It's your own fault the engagement is off. You need to take accountability for your actions. You will leave the house by end of the month." This was the moment my mother-in-law finally snapped and moved to cut ties with her own daughter. "Mom, you're on Maria's side, too?" With a face of disbelief, Dorothy tearfully stared at her mother. "You are not a child anymore. Take care of yourself." Mother-in-law said this, bowed her head to Steve, and returned to her bedroom. From the other room, only Dorothy's sobbing could be heard. Steve told me he would be in touch soon, and then left our house. My husband and I exchanged glances and sighed together. Maybe it's time for us to start looking for a new home. My husband nodded at my words, and from then on we decided to move on with our lives as if Dorothy didn't exist. 3 months have passed since then, and my mother-in-law has moved to a senior housing facility. We also moved to a place as close as possible to my mother-in-law, and we are in the process of selling the family home. Dorothy stayed locked up in her room until the day we moved, but of course we couldn't just leave her behind, so we forcibly packed her belongings into boxes and sent them to a storage unit. On the day of the move, we gave my sister-in-law the bare essentials, the key to the storage unit, and the $3,000 severance payment we had received from my mother-in-law. Dorothy seemed to have lost all motivation due to her broken engagement, and quit her job. I don't know what happened to her after that, and it seems Steve isn't in contact with her anymore. Steve told me that he was saved, once again, thanks to me. If I had gone through with that marriage, I would have definitely regretted it. You've always been my lifesaver, really. I can't help but feel guilty, thinking that in a way, Steve is the one who's been my lifesaver. I also wished for my sister-in-law to struggle in the end. But maybe if you do good deeds, you'll be rewarded like this. At least, that's what I thought this time. My sister-in-law treated me like a slave and constantly harassed me, which is probably why it ended like this. I've never seen or felt God, but from now on, I want to live a life where I can hold my head up high.
Everything is going as planned. As I went to the house to pick up something I had forgotten, my husband's voice came from the living room. "Your wife should be on her way to the other side soon." My mother-in-law says, "I can't believe they despised me so much that they wanted to murder me after living with me for so long. Normally, I would have questioned my husband and mother-in-law right away, but I didn't dare to do so because of my profession. I began my fight to expose them for the evil they had done the next day. Kathy Smith is my name. Ryan, my husband, is 3 years older, and we married 3 years ago. We met at my husband's workplace during a traffic safety class. At the time, I was a police officer in the traffic division. It was my first traffic safety class, and I was nervous because I was not used to speaking in front of large groups of people. I was impressed by the way he talked to me to calm me down. We became good friends as it was, but despite being married for many years, we still did not have children. I wanted to have children as soon as we married, but Ryan wasn't so sure. Raising a child is expensive, so maybe after we have a little more money saved up. He says so, but since we both work, I'm sure he's not concerned about money. But every time we discuss children, he dismisses it. I am not alone in my concern about not having children. Heather, my mother-in-law, has always been concerned about our lack of children. She seemed to be looking forward to grandchildren at first, but after 3 years, she began to suspect that I didn't want children. "You're not going to be young forever, so you better hurry," she said. "If a woman does not bear her husband's children, she's no better than a housekeeper." It's not like I don't want to have a child. When I tell Ryan what my mother-in-law said to me, he becomes irritated. "What exactly is it? Are you blaming me? I'm overworked and exhausted. If you truly desire a child, make an effort to make me feel that way." He would start saying that without fail, and he would pay close attention to my appearance. Anyway, his tastes don't suit me, and he prefers girls who dress younger. Furthermore, no matter how many times I tell him that I can't be too trendy because I don't know when I'll be called away for work, he doesn't get it. A wife who does not dress well is an unfit woman. You should think about it before complaining to me. I had no idea my husband, who had been so sweet to me before, had such terrible ideas, and I regretted marrying him. My department and work schedule changed 2 years into our marriage. It became increasingly difficult to time my husband's day off with mine, and we spent less and less time together. I knew it wasn't good for us, and even when we finally managed to schedule our time off work together, Ryan made plans with someone else. "You're canceling again. You promised last week that we'd go to the movies today." "Some girls at work invited me to go fishing yesterday. They said they couldn't put the bait on the hook because they were afraid. I apologize. It's part of my job." Despite his words of remorse, he has a grin on his face. As a result of my husband's selfishness, my much-anticipated plans were betrayed at every turn. I was in a bad mood and wanted to spend my day off at home. But then my mother-in-law would show up without an appointment at my house. "Oh, Ryan isn't here?" "He went fishing. Some girls from work asked him to accompany her." "I guess he'd rather play with other girls than be with you." I don't want to deal with my mother-in-law, who can say such things to me and act like she doesn't care. But I can't just leave her alone and go out. So my days off would end with her sarcastic remarks like this. "You don't appear to be able to have children. You need to be more proactive. You're his wife, right?" I'm doing my best as well, but it's about money, and Ryan isn't thrilled about it. "Because of finances?" "So, how much money do you make now?" I hesitated to tell her about private matters, even if she was my mother-in-law. When I told her a little less than my actual pay, she sneered, with a disappointed expression on her face. "Oh my, it's surprisingly less than I thought." "After all, I'm a civil servant." "With such low wages, how can you want to have children?" What on earth was she comparing them to? I wish she would not compare a wealthy individual to a civil servant. However, something about my mother-in-law's demeanor felt strange at the time. And the doubts I was experiencing at the time were only the beginning of the story that was to unfold. My mother-in-law began to openly bully me after that day. Her visits to my house have increased to the point where I see them half the week. When I got home from work one day, my mother-in-law entered the house using her own key and was cooking dinner. "Oh my, you're a wife, but you prioritize work over family. It must be wonderful not to have children." Perhaps it was because of my sarcastic mother-in-law's meals, but I was always sick after eating. She would wake me up once when I was sleeping after a night shift. "How long do you intend to stay in bed? You're not a good wife if you stay in bed until noon because of your job. This will make a man want to go out and find someone else." She then forced me to eat breakfast. As a result, I gradually discovered that nothing I ate tasted good, and in some cases tasted bitter. After more than a month of this, I was so tired from stress and lack of sleep that I had to go to the bathroom right after eating. When Ryan saw my tired face, he became annoyed rather than concerned. "I'd feel down too if you made such a sour face at home. You have been slacking by delegating housework to my mother, so you should at the very least be sociable. She only visits when I'm too busy to do the housework, and she's always sarcastic. You're well aware of this, aren't you?" Despite my warnings, he ignored me and continued to watch TV. He refused to listen to what I had to say. Instead, he kept laughing at the TV show, and my rage erupted. "Ryan, you don't look at me when we talk anymore. You've started canceling plans with me even on holidays. Are you having an affair?" "That's a horrible accusation." My husband raised his voice in response to my words. "I have a business matters." "How can you say that without knowing how difficult it is? You only feel that way because you're the one who's cheating on me." He turned red and spoke in a firm tone. I was too stunned by the power of his words to respond. Furthermore, my husband took it out on the vase on the table, knocking it to the floor and sending shards flying at my feet. "You don't have to go this far." That was the first time I had felt threatened by my husband. Such incidents have occurred on numerous occasions since then, and simply being at home with my husband has made me feel uneasy. I had to leave the house for a few days for work one day. I left for my business trip, but I realized I had left my important notebook at the door and forgotten about it. So I hurried back home. "It's so nice of you to go on a business trip without doing any housework, isn't it?" I was told the day before. I felt awkward seeing my husband because we had argued the day before and left the house. So when I got home, I opened the front door slowly so as not to make a sound. I discovered my mother-in-law's shoes there. I was about to walk away when I overheard them conversing. "I got the thing, and so far everything is going as planned. Your wife is going to die soon." That's correct. However, it's not as effective as I thought. She's been going to the bathroom after every meal, so I guess it's about time. The conversation took my breath away. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What exactly does she mean? I quickly took out my voice recorder, which I always keep with me, and began recording. Unaware of what I was up to, the two in the room were upbeat and talking loudly about their crazy plan. "Should we increase the amount of the life insurance policy? That way, we'll be able to pay off Mom's debt, right?" "I'd be extremely grateful. You won't have to look at that ugly girl every day too, then." I held my breath in surprise. I can't believe they think of me like that, even if they don't like me. In addition, I could hear him saying, "She's a police officer, but in the traffic department, so she'll never find out about it." I gradually became more angry than sad, vowing vengeance on them. On my business trip, I kept thinking about how I could get back at my husband. A colleague who was with me was concerned about my glum expression, and when I complained to him, he gave me some unexpected information. He told me that a drunken man had caused a commotion at a club a while ago, and when he arrived, he discovered that the drunken man was Ryan. He said that he recognized my husband's face right away because he was at my wedding. "This is my girlfriend," he exclaimed. "I'll beat up anyone who tries to touch her." Ryan was so drunk, hugging the female workers and kicking the table. But he wasn't drunkenly saying this. He actually appeared to be in a relationship with her. I suspected he was cheating on me. Everything my husband had done up to that point made sense to me. I wasn't surprised as I was shocked, but I was motivated to conduct a thorough investigation into my husband's affairs as well. Watch out, I'm not going to let this go. A week later, my husband abruptly began speaking to me in the same friendly tone he used when we first began dating. I was expecting him to have a hidden agenda, but instead he handed me a document. "Kathy, you always give your all in your dangerous job as a police officer. I admire you as a husband, but I'm concerned about you." What a pleasant surprise. It was a life insurance application. I was convinced that he was considering carrying out the plan. Even so, I wanted to believe Ryan one more time. "Do you really believe that? Is it possible that someone will try to murder me? Would you be concerned if that happened?" I locked my gaze into his. "Please, I beg you to reconsider," I thought in my head, as he nodded at me with a big smile on his face. "Of course! So get moving. Please sign this application." Is the only thing he sees in his eyes now the insurance money he can get in exchange for my life? He was a scumbag to the core, but thanks to him, I felt confident in sanctioning him. In this world, you never know who's out to get you, do you? Yes, and yes! There have been so many upsetting incidents. Someone in your family, for example, has a stupid idea. Yeah. Like planning to get rid of a wife who causes problems because he wants to be with a younger woman. My husband's eyes began to swim as he became visibly upset. His debt-ridden mother tempted him to take out an expensive insurance policy on his wife and kill her. Wait a second. What the hell are you? In front of my husband, I play the voice recorder. When I play the voice recorder in front of my husband, his face distorted and became ugly as his mother-in-law's conversation and vulgar laughter began to flow out. Hey, what's up this recording? I happened to overhear it. Thank goodness I have a voice recorder. I wouldn't have it if I'd spent my entire life working in traffic. You work in the traffic division, though. I'm now in the criminal division. I also told you so. So, I guess you've been busy thinking about a woman since then, and you've been ignoring me. I slammed the photographs of the affair evidence that my husband had hidden in his room. These were the only ones I discovered while searching the house while my husband was away, and strong evidence. I don't know anything of these pictures. I don't even know who she is. Huh. I heard she works at a high-end club, the one you had a problem at. You're so cool. I heard you yelling, "She's my girl!" How much do you know about? Not sure. Concerned. He was now making excuses to his wife no matter what. My mother is to blame. When she discovered that I was dating another girl, she insisted that I marry her rather than you because of your low salary. My husband's words made sense. When my mother-in-law inquired about my salary and stated that it was low, most likely referring to my husband's girlfriend. According to the voice recorder recording and listening to the conversation, my mother-in-law owed me a substantial sum of money. It would be shallow of her to try to pay off the debt with my insurance money and from my husband's new girlfriend. So you're saying it was your mother who devised me the scheme? Yeah, I had absolutely nothing to do with it. What are you on about? It started with you cheating on her to begin with. It's disgusting to blame someone else for it. You will never be forgiven. I shouted, and my husband grabbed my chest while screaming incoherently. I grabbed him by the hand and threw him to the ground with all my might. I'm a cop. I'm used to dealing with aggressive people like you. I don't need life insurance to protect myself. My husband became weak and apologetic when he saw the handcuffs. You're arrested. I apologize. I don't know what I was doing. Please accept my apologies. I'll hear your excuses at the police station. I'll give you ample opportunity to explain. Following that, my husband and his mother were imprisoned for a time for plotting to kill me. I filed for divorce and demanded $20,000 in alimony from both my husband and his girlfriend. They may be freed soon because it was an attempted murder, but I am sure they will be fired from their jobs. And they will have a difficult life with the alimony payments and paying off my mother-in-law's debts. On the other hand, for the first time in a long time, I'm enjoying living alone. I've been forced to live in a small space, so I decided to stretch out and spread my wings for a little while longer.